AJ, if you could just message me to confirm it's live when it is, that'd be great. Is it? Hi everyone, we'll just wait a minute or two for everyone to finish joining and then we'll get started about 1 or 2 minutes past. Amazing. It looks like numbers have settled down a bit, so we'll get started. Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, How to Work in Academia Without Being an Academic. My name is Ben and I am an Alumni Engagement Manager here in the King's Alumni Office. This is the second of our How To event series for the academic year. This series supports recent graduates and students to understand the issues affecting the workplace and helps you to feel well prepared to pursue, choose, and succeed in your careers. Today's session looks at the numerous opportunities there are to work in academia and impact world-leading research without directly having to work as a researcher. We'll explore the journey from initial research idea to real-world impact, how different roles impact this journey, and share guidance for how to identify and pursue careers in different areas, making the most of the skills you've gained through previous study. This will take the form of a conversation with our speakers, who we'll introduce in a moment, followed by an opportunity for you to ask your own questions. Please post any questions you have in the Q&A function, and a member of the event team will sort these into themes so we can get through as many relevant topics in the time we have as possible. If anyone is joining from the YouTube live stream, you can also post your questions there. The event's due to last just about an hour, and we will be recording the session and making this available afterwards as well. So I'm delighted to welcome today's panelists, all three of whom are graduates of King's and now working across the field in different roles. We've got Verity, Kat and Karine. Can I ask you to introduce yourselves briefly, telling us a bit about, what you studied, an overview of your career journey today and kind of how you ended up where you are now? Maybe we'll go in that order, Verity, Kat and then Karine.
Thank you. So I'm Verity. I did the master's in war and psychiatry, and I did that part-time between 2011 and 2013. I did it part-time, mostly for financial reasons, but it actually was quite helpful because it allowed me to do some volunteering and some work alongside. I did do counselling psychology as an undergrad, and I thought I'd end up working with the military, probably as a researcher. But the course actually leaned me more towards civilian mental health and post-conflict situations and mental health and sort of cultural influences of mental health. I did an internship while I was studying for the Council for At-Risk Academics, and that sort of started my charity career, really. I ended up working in the charity sector for about 10 years. I ran lots of projects, first working with early career charity leaders, mostly in countries that went through the Arab Spring, North Africa, and the Middle East. And then later I did do a bit of a stint as a research assistant and in sort of dipped a toe in a PhD, but I missed the charity sector project work and went back and ended up working with early career academics. And that was in the context of international development and climate change research. So I ran fellowships and training, and I did a lot of travel, and then COVID happened and all of that stopped. And I had to look for a new job, and a job came up at King's. So I currently work at King's. I started as an impact manager for a small research centre, and I'm now the research impact lead for the Faculty of Natural, Mathematical and Engineering Sciences. And that's supporting academics to articulate evidence and embed impact into their research.
Amazing, thank you. On to Kat, please.
Hi, my name is Kat. I studied biochemistry at King's between 2014 and 18, and I graduated with an MSci degree, which is an integrated undergraduate master's. So from very early on, I had great mentorship at King's, and I tried to get involved with a lot of research. Early on, I was also very involved with the Biochemistry Society that we started when I was at King's, and that kind of led me to be very interested in the field of structural biology. And I thought, this is the best thing ever, and this is what I want to be involved in. And I embarked on this journey into academia and into research, and I went on to do a PhD in biological science, but focused on structural molecular biology. But towards the end of my PhD, I realized that what I enjoy most about the PhD is not the core part of it, which is doing the research myself. And I think everyone goes through a little bit of an existential crisis in their degrees. And there were a few that I went through. But I started looking at options that, would still satisfy my curiosity, keep me close to research, but not necessarily doing it myself, a postdoctoral position, eventually leading to being an independent researcher. And my career basically, I came up on the path basically by serendipity. I was researching things, I was looking what's out there, and I saw an ad for a job. And the job was to be an editor at a journal called Nature Structural and Molecular Biology. And I thought it was really interesting, and I thought I would never get it. I haven't even finished my PhD yet, but I applied just to see what it would be like, and I got it. So now I'm a senior editor at a research journal in the Nature portfolio. I'm happy to talk about that. So I'm definitely not in academia. I'm academia adjacent, and I enjoy that very much. And I interact with researchers on a day-to-day basis, which is great.
Amazing, thank you. And then on to Karine.
Thank you. I'm Karine, and I did my master's at King's back in 2014-15 in arts and cultural management, which I enjoyed very much. And it was a year that really widened my horizons and helped me expand my network. I met a lot of people working in audience engagement, particularly, which looked fascinating, and I was keen to learn more about it. Through KCL Careers, actually, I secured an internship at an art gallery in East London, which was amazing and had a lot to do with audience engagement. Really developed an appetite for this, and it really helped me realize that that was really an area of interest for me. This then translated into working in alumni relations at King's College and later at Imperial, where I really got to explore the vast world of engagement. I got to be involved in developing programs for different audience segments, and that had a lot to do with connecting researchers and alumni and tapping quite heavily at some point into professional development programs and programming. So that then led to my current role at the Royal Society, where I oversee the delivery of our career development program for early career researchers funded by the Society, and that has to do with helping them through various means to become 21st century leaders and, ultimately be successful. Happy to talk a little bit more about that further down the line.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. We'll start with just asking a couple of questions. A reminder, if you do have any of your own questions you want to ask, don't be afraid to put those into the Q&A, and we can incorporate those into the conversation as well. But just to get us started, I guess, it'd be really interesting to hear from you a little bit more about your role in details, about your roles in details. So, what part does your role play in the research pipeline? What other roles do you interact with? And what are kind of your key priorities within your job in order to make research more impactful? Should we start with Karine and go backwards this time?
Sure. Very happy to talk you through this. So the researchers that I support as part of my role are mostly early career researchers, outstanding early career researchers at that, and people with potential to become real scientific leaders in their field. And they've essentially been awarded those fellowships to help them build an independent career and have the freedom to pursue very innovative, curiosity-led scientific research. Normally, it's people within 8 years or so, often earlier from the award of their PhD. And the main function of my role and my team, for that matter, is to help them at this stage in their career to develop as research leaders by offering them high-quality training, and networking opportunities. It is a time when they start building their own teams, setting up labs and so on. So, beyond being scientific leaders and having that outstanding scientific expertise, they will need a whole host of other skills as well as a strong network to succeed. So that's where my role comes in and fits in within that process that you've alluded to, Ben. A lot of that has to do with interacting with other roles across the Royal Society and beyond. Of course, I work a lot with colleagues managing the grants themselves to ensure that, the offering is in tune with the fellowships themselves. There's a lot of collaboration with colleagues from areas of public engagement, policy, engaging with schools, publishing. There's a lot, so we can maximize those opportunities that we offer to our researchers and ensure that the offering is coherent. There are, of course, partners outside the society. There will be stakeholders and sponsors of particular programming strands, and those relationships are, of course, very important to me. And, if anything, this is a very versatile role, and it really doesn't get boring ever. But I think within that, the researchers are really the main focus and kind of the main key priority, and that's where the most impact lies, I would say. It is key in my role to stay audience-driven as much as possible and, make sure that that offering remains relevant to the needs of the audience that I'm working with. So, it's very important to make sure that establishing various communication channels with the researchers works, and that, I get to reflect on the programming that I build. It is vital to develop your understanding constantly of the research landscape, because the programming really needs to work in tune with that. And, because we now know that being brilliant in science isn't enough to become the leader of tomorrow and become successful in developing your research. And ultimately, I would say that my role is best placed to connect the dots. When it comes to decision-making on certain programs, I find myself often to be that focal point where everything meets, because I'm the one who's been exposed to a lot of viewpoints and a lot of perspectives, as well as, being aware of previous experience and sector best practice, and a whole host of other things. So that really makes it possible for me to then connect the dots and bring the project to the outcomes that are the most beneficial for the target audience. So that's where I would say it all really connects.
Amazing, thank you. I think that point about, having lots of different viewpoints and really connecting them together is something that I imagine might be a theme in the conversation when we're talking about such complex research. I'll hand over to Kat.
Hello again. the question was about my role and the part I play,
so
right?
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So as I said, I am a journal editor. So there's a lot of scientific journals out there for all the different fields. Not all of them have full-time professional scientific editor like I am. But at the company where I work, this is the basis of the staffing is professional editors. So I don't have any other interests than publishing the science that comes to us. So as an editor, I basically all of the research that comes to me has already been done. I'm at the end of the scientific journey of the authors where they are ready to wrap the project up and want to publish it, to disseminate it to likely the widest audience that's possible. And my journal is particularly interested in mechanistic insights about molecules that drive life. So my role in the very first steps of interacting with authors and scientists is choosing the articles that we would pursue publishing. And my main interest lies in that, publishing the best that we can from what comes to us. And my interest lies with the readership of the journal. So what's going to be interesting and have the most impact for the people who might be reading our journal. And the base of my interactions today are, of course, with my colleagues and other editors, but mostly with the corresponding authors of the papers that I handle, so the senior scientists. But I also travel to conferences quite a lot and visit labs, and I interact with all of the researchers at different stages of their careers. And probably interacting with the earlier career researchers is the most enjoyable part of the job, the people who actually get their hands dirty doing the research. So as I said, my key priority is choosing the manuscripts for potential publication. But then what does that entail besides filtering out what we can publish and what we want to pursue? I facilitate the process of peer review, so I interact with a lot of scientists who would be the potential readers of those articles to provide their feedback. And through that feedback, we aim to improve the manuscripts, both in their technical aspects, but also in the solidity of the science that supports the conclusions in the research. So this is the more technical part of the job, working on primary research articles, but we also, and this is quite fun, try to help disseminate the science that we end up publishing in the end, all of the primary research. This is quite specialized, and we do this by writing and commissioning pieces aimed at a slightly wider audience, written by scientists, for scientists, but in a little bit more approachable format that summarizes the primary research that we publish or other people might have published, other journals might have published. I also work with scientists to edit their articles, be it primary research or say review articles that summarize the fields. And I can also work with the authors and other colleagues in my company to help press release any of the science that comes to us. So I really come at the very end of the process.
Amazing, thank you. And then on to Verity.
Thank you. So yeah, my role, I guess, in terms of the role I play in the research pipeline, it's really at all stages. Researchers come to me all the time at various stages and also at different career levels. So I work with everyone from PhD students all the way through to senior professors. The one thing that I sort of really try to emphasize is the fact that yes, impact is that kind of long-term sustained change, but it doesn't only have to be thought of or considered at the end of a project. It has to be embedded from the very beginning. And my role is quite interesting. So I'm one of 5 research impact leads, and we look after different parts of the college. And we actually sit at the centre of the college in what's called the Research Management and Innovation Directorate. I have the longest job title. And the scope of my role has two parts really. One is really broad, and that's just about embedding impact into research culture and helping people to think about impact in a slightly more holistic way. And the other is very specific and looking at the development of impact case studies for the REF exercise. So I won't go into the nuts and bolts of it, but essentially every 7 to 8 years we submit evidence to say how good our research is, and the UK government give us money based on how well we perform. So we have to identify impact case studies that demonstrate, you know, how good our research is. The thing that's quite challenging about my role is that if people aren't already coming to me because of my job title or my visibility, normally they see me coming and think, oh my God, she's just going to ask me to do more work. And, you know, researchers already have to balance so many responsibilities. They're teaching, they've got admin roles, they could be head of department or head of a research group. They're doing the actual research. And then I come along and sort of say, okay, can you prove that you're doing what you say you're doing and that there's value in what you're doing? So yeah, it's a really interesting role, but it means having to play many roles and wear many hats. And I sort of describe the role more as a kind of knowledge broker, if you like. So, you know, if someone's talking to me at the design and development stage of their work, it could be helping them think about who their stakeholders are or who the beneficiaries, who are they going to partner with, what kind of impact do they want to achieve, what do they care about. REF is, you know, a blessing and a curse sometimes, because yes, it drives those conversations, but I think the incentives sometimes can be quite difficult. You know, you get kind of your name on a case study, but you don't actually get any of the money really, unless it gets filtered down. So it's working with them to figure out what kind of stuff they want to do, what activities should they be doing as part of their research projects, what engagement, and a lot of that involves working with teams across both the faculty and across the college, and sometimes externally. So in the faculty that I work in, we have what's called an enterprise and engagement team, and that includes outreach, so working with schools and communities. We've got a comms team, events managers. So often it's about talking to an academic and be like, okay, well, it sounds like you want to reach this audience, but we have this team that can support you to do that, and we have a conversation and, you know, a lot of signposting. And we also have central college teams. We have the Policy Institute, for example. So some academics I work with are really interested in influencing policy. That could be government policy. It could be national, you know, or local government policy. It can even be policy of, you know, certain sectors or, you know, organizations or manufacturing processes, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's often about facilitating these relationships, leveraging those networks. If people want to work externally, it's making sure that they've got the right contact at King's, or there's lots of specialised groups that specialise in co-producing research and participatory research that I can put people in touch with. My background in the charity sector, a lot of the work that I did was government funded. So I worked with a lot of UK aid money, which meant that I was evaluated within an inch of my life. So I had to produce evidence of everything I was doing and prove that the money I was spending was worth spending. So I have a lot of evaluation experience, and I bring that to the work that I'm doing. So helping academics think about, okay, what evidence do you need? If you're applying for future funding, what evidence can you provide to prove that, you know, this is worth investing in? Or if you were developing an impact case study, what kind of evidence can we provide there? So a lot of that evaluation, and trying to create networks as well and put people in touch and share that best practice. I use research skills myself. I mean, you know, a lot of the work I have to review quite a lot of data, and there's sometimes, you know, we do reports on previously submitted case studies. Looking at literature and trends, you know, the sector is always changing, the REF guidance is always changing. So it's important to keep on top of new ways of working and to really push those college level changes that are going to make the researchers' lives a little bit easier, hopefully. And I think really the sort of, in terms of the way that I work with academics, I think the important thing about my role is that I can't force them to do anything, and I can't make the impact happen, right? Just because we have a conversation doesn't mean it's going to happen. And actually a lot of the role is a little bit more like coaching. I'm training as a coach because of it. So I'm thinking, oh gosh, maybe I should formalize this, because, you know, it's about getting people to really want to tell their impact stories and want to influence change outside of academia. In the faculty I work with, we have a lot of theoretical researchers, and I say to them all the time, like, impact on research is fine. Like, if you just want to further knowledge and understanding and, you know, the theoretical work, you know, I'm not going to force you to look outside of academia, but there are applications and there are ways, if you are interested in, I'm here if you want me to be, like, you know, for that kind of support. But it's not the kind of impact I'm paid to care about, to be blunt about it. So, you know, it's about really working with them and thinking, what does impact look like for your work and for your career and your trajectory? Like, where do you see yourself, and how can we help you get there? And yeah, in terms of priorities, I suppose it's just not putting people off and trying to get people thinking about impact in a really creative way and in a way that means something to them.
Amazing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Kind of going off of that, I think some of you have, all of you actually have mentioned this to some degree already, but it'd be interesting to hear in a bit more detail, how your current roles fit in with your own personal skills and interests, and kind of what was it about your previous positions that kind of helped you realize that your current role was something that you were keen to do or wanted to pursue later down the line. I'll let you kind of come in at any order you'd like.
I can kick us off if that's helpful. So like I said, I worked in the charity sector, and I was trained as a project manager, if you like. Very set ways of working, and again, I think when you're in that sector, impact is just part of what you do. You wouldn't design a project without intending to have an impact. And we had set frameworks that we were reporting to. So the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, a lot of the work I did on climate change was in sub-Saharan Africa, and you work against different goals and priorities and ways of working. And it was a very set model, I suppose. And I really, part of that work, first of all, I worked with early career charity leaders, but there was an awful lot of professional development skills and techniques, and that kind of fed into the work I was doing with early career researchers as well. And I loved working with the universities and seeing how the systems were so different from country to country, and how impact was measured and what was prioritized, how the universities worked with local communities. A lot of the work that I did, I ran a project called Circle, and it was looking at climate impacts, and we had the most amazing research of looking at interdisciplinary aspects, things like gender effects of climate change, and working with different farmers in different communities. And I think it was always interlinked with community and change. And like I say, yeah, during COVID, it all stopped, and I had to really think about, gosh, what do I look for? Where do I go from here? What role do I take? And when the role at King's came up, I thought it was that perfect mix. It was the project experience. The job title was Impact Projects Manager, and the centre was the ESRC Centre for Society and Mental Health, and it was between two faculties. So it was between social science and public policy and the Institute of Psychology and Neuroscience. And that's actually how my master's was divided. It was split across those two faculties as well. So I had a bit of familiarity. I didn't know anybody. It'd been a long time since I studied, but that interdisciplinary approach and kind of thinking about the way that mental health was influenced by communities and context, it was quite a nice blend of the experience that I had. But I think it was very, pure luck, to be honest, that I happened to get a notification at the right time and the right piece. But I think having those skills, those project management skills, but also working with people, part of the job was really working with people on a one-on-one level to figure out, okay, what kind of support do you need? What is available in your university versus what I can offer to you separately? And again, that idea of knowledge brokering, through that work, I was working with lots of government funders, lots of charities, lots of other universities. It's really having that sector knowledge and a cross-sector knowledge actually, and be able to bring that to the table. And again, that impact piece, I love working with researchers. I'm so fascinated with how people end up doing what they do. You have, and in my job especially, you get to, 1 minute I'm talking about black holes and space exploration, and then I'm talking to somebody else about sustainable prosthetics and healthcare treatment. So it's so diverse, and I think just being really interested in people and how to provide them with really practical skills. It's about, okay, have you tried this technique? Have you tried this tool? Have you spoken to this person or this network? It's kind of problem solving in collaboration with others, and I think that's part of absolutely what my job has always been. And there's that common thread that's threaded through. And it is challenging working across different sectors and moving into higher education rather than being adjacent, but it's a really good learning experience, and I think it made me realize actually just how many skills are transferable, and even you don't have to know the ins and outs of every single part of everyone's research, but just understanding and being able to talk to somebody, and I say to them, if they can help me understand their research, then half the job's done. So it's those kinds of skills. I'll stop talking now. Just having that interest in people and frameworks, and the kind of mixing the practical skills with your interest.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Karine and Kat, did you want to add anything to that from your perspectives?
Sure, and I couldn't agree more with what you said, Verity. And in my line of work as well, I get to interact with exceptionally brilliant people every day, and that's I think the most inspirational part of my job, and from my colleagues to the research fellows themselves that I work with, in this environment, you come to realize how science really transcends boundaries and and borders, and you get to experience firsthand and support academics who are doing some mind-blowing research. And it is really inspirational to realize that you're able to, in my line of work, to support that process, facilitate that process through providing very tailored professional development opportunities, and potentially help remove help remove some of those blockers that they may face and develop as research leaders. It is a very important part of my role and my kind of motivation, if you will. In my case, I developed my skill set and a good foundation in audience and community engagement through work in a different area, in arts and humanities, and subsequently an understanding of its application in STEM and experience of working in STEM and with people from STEM through my work at Imperial College, notably, and which made my skill set overall that I had built up until that point a very good fit for my current role at the Royal Society. And that gave me the realization that my role, and actually in any future roles that I may hold, because the programs that I'm working on are so tailored to the specific scientific needs of the scientific communities, they will require very particular skill sets going forward. And it would be it would be really interesting to see how all of that pans out, because if you think about that, some of the roles that we see now in this area, they may not have been created when we started our degrees. It's very interesting how it is all developing together with the way that the scientific landscape is changing. And I guess on a related note, what I really like about my line of work is that bringing people together is a very important part of it, and I believe in the power actually of bringing people together for with a specific purpose. I believe that a lot can be achieved through this. So connecting people has always been something that a lot of emphasis has been placed on in my career so far, and the art of bringing people together, it is very simple, powerful, but also one of the most complex things that you can do. But when you do it right, and then you hear your audience members report on things like, they made a potential collaborator through the work that you have put into a project, or they have it has opened their eyes on a new way of looking at their research through something that you have designed. It really is where that you can really see that impact of your work, and it is really powerful. I think that's one of the things that really aligns with my values and where I see the most impact and interest for myself.
Amazing, thank you. And I'll just hand over to Kat for any additional comments.
Yes, I think Verity and Karim both talked about working with people, and this is a very big part of my job, because as much as I thought this is mostly about working with papers, there's a lot of people behind the papers and a lot of work, and a big part of someone's life has been just put on paper, and this is something that I'm definitely learning to do on the job. I didn't have any experience working with researchers in that context, but what appeals to me and still appeals to me in this job is the aspect of the papers themselves, and the breadth of different topics that I handle and read about. This is also something that Verity touched upon, and Karin. I my breadth of interest in my job is not as wide to talk, to aerospace engineers and then about prosthetics, but I do handle different biological topics that are all equally interesting. And from my very early days at King's, when I got involved, as I said, in the Biochemistry Society, and we're organizing these talks with researchers, and who told us about their projects and their labs and what they're working on. And I always thought, oh my God, how do you ever choose what to work on? What do you spend your life doing? And I don't have to. I get to read about everything now. And in my PhD, I also always loved reading papers outside of my area of my own project, so I didn't really have enough time to read them. All those super cool, interesting things. And now it's my job to an extent. And I always loved Journal Club. I loved reading those papers, talking about them. I loved conferences. I loved talking to other people about their research. And this is basically the core of my job, talking to other people about their research, why it's important, why they think it's important. So I think, that's it.
Amazing, thank you. We've spoken a lot about kind of, why the roles appeal to you and the impact they make. I thought it'd be interesting to look a little bit like, any particular challenges you faced working in this kind of field. And this is a question for all three of you, be that working with academics, be that making that impact follow through, any kind of things you found challenging and you've had to kind of, and any kind of advice, I guess, to like help face that challenge.
I think one challenge that I've sort of spoken about quite a few times with academics is the fact that I don't have a PhD and I work with researchers. So often talking, there may be a question in their mind of like, you don't do research. How can you tell me how to do my research? And I think the important thing is about being confident in yourself and knowing that you have transferable skills and you do have expertise. And it doesn't matter what sector or what job you're moving to, there is always something, I think you mentioned before, that's transferable. But I think an important part of that is being able to build relationships and build trust and always trying to have something to offer someone, even if that's just some insight or, like I say, you're trying to bring these practical skills and saying, okay, well, and not necessarily showing off your CV and saying, no, look, I have done all this kind of stuff. It's about really figuring out how you can be helpful. And I think that's something that can be quite challenging when you're applying for roles, especially looking at university roles or with research institutions or things like that. Often they do ask for that, doctoral level or equivalent experience or something like that. We see it less and less, but I wouldn't say don't let that put you off, but to just be really sure of yourself in terms of the skills that you're actually bringing and the value that you bring to these types of roles.
Amazing. Corinne, did you want to come in?
Absolutely, yes, I would agree with that and second that. I think as someone without a PhD working in an academic adjacent area, yes, there will be some roles that will require or make having a PhD a very beneficial experience for you in this area, but it doesn't necessarily have to be so. I do not see that necessarily as a barrier. I think the important things is to understand how you map yourself against a certain role and what do you bring to the table. Like you said, Verity, what do you bring to the role? Where do you come in, and where does your skill set or unique combination of skills that you have that maybe no one else has makes a difference and makes that, gives you that edge. I think definitely communication skills, in addition to, to stakeholder management and that ability to build relationships, to build trust, are key. There will be a huge variety of people that you have to communicate with on a daily basis. If you work in an academic adjacent area, they will not just be academics, there will be various stakeholders, and they will bring in a variety of styles, temperaments, levels of seniority, all of that whole bouquet. And it is genuinely very important for the project that you're working in to get the best out of that mix, to really benefit the projects that you're working on. So getting the communication right is key in this area, I would say. But I would also heavily caveat that by saying it is not, if you do not consider yourself to be a communication genius at the stage where you're at, it doesn't mean that you're not going to improve. It is a learned behavior. But it is important to put effort into that if you know that this is something that you're going to go into or you're interested in. It is important to invest in that because it is going to do you a lot of favors.
Amazing. And Kat, did you want to add anything from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with what Verity and Corinne said. And, I do have a PhD and I work with people who also have PhDs. But doesn't necessarily make things better, because I'm an outsider making decisions about other people's work without necessarily directly the same kind of expertise that they have or that they think that is required to assess their work. And communication as well, that Karine already talked a lot about, is a vital part of my job. And I think any job that is academia adjacent, or and the blunt truth about my job is that I deliver a lot of bad news. I work at a selective journal, and we reject most articles. We do not publish most of what is submitted to us, and that requires the skills of being able to deliver those news and decisions professionally with certain level of empathy, so that it can be understood why this decision was made, with people who they're not going to agree with your decision because they submitted an article to your journal thinking that it's suitable for it. And it's the same with interacting with people at conferences. Just communication is core to everything.
Amazing. Thank you. And I think there's some really, it's great to hear that, you're all from such different perspectives, but really agreeing on, the importance of communication, being able to kind of understand the unique impact you make and why that matters and why that adds value to what's going on. That's really interesting. I'm going to ask one more question from my end, and then we'll turn to some of the audience questions. For people who are attending today who, they might be interested in pursuing some of these roles, but they're not necessarily sure where to start, what some practical first steps are, or kind of, how do I turn this kind of interest into finding a role or figuring out what my next steps are? Do you have any advice in terms of things people can be doing to help figure out what roles are available and start to explore what best fits their own skills?
I can be a brave one this time. I think the only piece of advice I can really give on this is talk to everyone you know, and talk to everyone you know who you think might know someone. Because there are careers out there that you don't even realize exist. I'm getting a lot out of this event, hearing Verity's and Karine's experiences, right? Go to these events, go to all of the career fairs, even if you think, oh, I don't really want a role in XYZ, you might find out that there's some sort of a niche out there that actually sounds interesting. And it's only through talking to people who actually do the jobs you're going to find out what any of those actually entail. So I was always interested in a sort of science communication-ish career. And, for my role, you don't need a PhD to do it, because it gets to do with primary research. You need this research experience at a certain level to do it. But there are a lot of roles, even in my company, in the Nature portfolio, to, like news writers, different types of writers in science magazines and more popular magazines that, you do need some sort of a science degree, a master's, a bachelor's, and you can do those jobs. You can look for internships. And again, in my own company, there are summer internships. There are summer internships within universities that can lead to careers, or just dipping your toes in different things. And talk to your support networks, your supervisors, if you're doing any sort of research, or your lecturers have had students before who have not stayed in academia. The majority of them probably do not have an academic career as an academic, and they will know of people who have gone to do some interesting things. So just talk to people to find out.
Amazing. And I think one thing you touched on was, sometimes it's hard to kind of appreciate how big some of these universities are. So like even at King's, your area of King's, no matter what you do, ends up being so small. The second you start peeling away the layers, there's so much going on and there's so many different ways to get involved that you just didn't know existed. So yeah, makes a lot of sense.
I'd also just further that to say, it's not just the network around you, but there are lots of, I think it's worth thinking about what matters to you and what parts of the job or the studies you're doing, like what do you really enjoy? And when I was looking for work in a different sector, the job title I had didn't transfer, right? So I had to, using search terms like, I don't know, I was looking at social impact or, impact assessment, using these kind of things that you like as search terms can be really helpful in looking at sector specific jobs. So we've got Jobs AC, but then there's like charity jobs, or even LinkedIn can be really good because it makes recommendations based on your experience and what you put on there. I'm also part of lots of different networks. So there's a Women in Higher Education network that I'm a part of, the UK Evaluation Society. I'm even part of the 93% Club, which is for state school educated professionals. So looking at various networks and different opportunities and making the most of those, I think is really helpful. And particularly in your local area, like even like if you've got a university near you or the alumni network here, just really leveraging it. And I think, yeah, put yourself out there, like ask for coffee, virtual coffees or virtual meetings, or lunches. Like people very rarely say no in my experience. People love talking about themselves and their experiences, and you always learn something. And also I would say for anything like this is to be kind to yourself as well. It can be challenging moving sectors or making a decision to change the direction of your career. And I think often it's hard to see how those skills can transfer, but it's through looking at jobs that are out there, looking at job descriptions, looking at what they're asking for, talking to people in those positions, and thinking about ways, how can you learn, how can you develop, how can you build that skill set? Don't put too much pressure on yourself. It might take some time.
Yes, I would absolutely echo that. I think as well as that roles in this sector are not quite as linear or as fixed as we might think, and the careers aren't linear either. So, and like I mentioned earlier, many of the roles that you will see over the next couple of years are likely to have just been created and not have existed when you just started your degree. So just really explore what is out there is the point here, and the answers really might surprise you genuinely because many research adjacent roles are so closely aligned to the areas that they support. Many will require specific combinations of skills. So really put it in front of you what you've got. Look at your skill set in more detail to understand where you are against all of those different role descriptions. And yes, I completely agree. Ask for a coffee. I have never actually seen in real life that anyone has refused anyone a coffee, at least in my area. I haven't seen that. Go talk to people, ask people if you're interested in a particular role, ask that person for a coffee, ask them more about their job, people like that, but all the while I would say just, keep your values close is probably what I would emphasize the most. It is what will ultimately determine whether you flourish or suffer in a role. Its alignments to your values is quite key. So as long as you have the anchor with you all the time, I don't see how you could go too far wrong.
Thank you, everyone. We've got quite a few questions coming in, so we've just been kind of combining them into themes in the background. We've had a few actually specifically about networking, which I know has come up in a couple of your answers already, but I thought it'd be interesting to explore in more detail. The basic answer is, how do you do it? I think people are talking about finding a balance between the professional and the personal, quite challenging, but also identifying those spaces where you can effectively do that. How do you identify events that are going to be helpful for you, and how do you pull value out of those sessions and kind of make sure you're going into those networking events really intentionally?
I can start this one. I would say you don't have to necessarily go to an event that is called networking event to network. I think if networking is your goal, I think the first step would be to look at what resources for that you currently have. Your alumni network, any mentoring programs available to you at your institution where you studied, all of that. Sometimes these things are just right in front of us, but we just don't necessarily, we sometimes just discount them, let's face it. It's sometimes well, quite often happens. So just go back to what already is available to you and see how you can really tap into those resources. Sometimes your inbox will be full of offers like that, and maybe you don't necessarily pay the attention. So I would start with that. And then I guess my main advice for networking would be not overthinking it, and doing it in a way that is authentic to you. Networking is a very tricky thing in terms of the way that we perceive it. Many of us don't find it as, to be something that comes naturally to us, and it can be a real barrier. But you can start small, and I think networking is something that we all have skills for, but we don't necessarily realize it because we have been communicating with people our whole lives. So I think just start small, tap into the networks that you have. If you go somewhere and you feel shy, just start with one person, talk to one person, and then you can take it from there. I would probably say that this would be a good start.
Amazing, thank you. Verity and Kat, do you want to add anything, or is that do you feel that's covered the question?
I would say that the question of intention is good. I think having, why do you want to go to this event? Who do you want to meet? Is it, finding out about a new role or finding out about a particular sector? That can be something as simple as like looking and seeing who's, I don't know, if you're going to an event, for example, you might have an attendee list, or Corinne was saying about these, like, the formal programs, formal mentoring, formal schemes like that. I find it helpful to think about, the breaking the ice piece is when you go to a networking event or you're going to like a seminar or speaking thing, it's like, oh God, how do I start a conversation? I think, again, if you're going to a particular session or something, just having a question or asking someone why they're there, why did they go to this session or something? It can be really challenging. I would say the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think the more confident you are and the more you realize what you can get out of them. For example, the UK Valuation Society, it's a huge group, and they do a coffee roulette. So they randomly match two people together. It's and you have a virtual coffee together. Stuff like that it really helps you to start getting used to that process of introducing yourself. And there's loads of stuff out there you can find about, like, how to introduce yourself, or elevator pitches, all that kind of stuff. But I think just the more you do it, definitely look for as many as you can, the different kinds of opportunities. And even stuff like, I used to go on Eventbrite and just use terms and see what was out there and what was going on, university web pages and things like that. So I think, just have a look and see what's out there.
Amazing, thank you. Kat, do you want to add anything, or shall we go on to...
I feel like I could just echo what Verity and Corinne already said.
Cool. Where we have time, we've got about 9 minutes left, so I'll try and get through as many questions as we can. We've got a couple of questions about kind of like entry-level positions and kind of what to expect when you do them. So it'd be interesting to hear your experience about, what did your first role look like when you were starting out in this kind of academic adjacent career? What kind of knowledge was expected of you? Did you feel like that role at that very early stage aligned, to the end point you were aiming for? Do you think it was more kind of a feel your way as you went through that kind of thing?
So I'm still in my entry-level role, I guess. This is my first job out of finishing my studies, which took some time, admittedly. I think the most important thing for my role was my research experience in principle, but also what I got out of that, which are, skills that are transferable, that not necessarily, we talked about all of that a little bit earlier. So what did I get out of my degrees that wasn't explicitly thought? So, thinking broadly and critically, all of that. I don't really have any experience in writing or editing. All of that was done basically on the job, and in the role that I have, it wasn't particularly expected. But there are things that you can do to prepare yourself for, specifically I guess, writing, editing, science communication, and it is just writing, and it is reading, and it is talking about research, and it doesn't need to be any formal experience or training. I'm sure that could help, but if you can show those skills in, say, interviews or at the beginning of your job, then I guess that has value.
Amazing. Verity and Creed, do you want to add anything to that?
I think just be mindful that a lot of entry-level opportunities, if it's a good organization, of course, they'll have learning opportunities, training, professional development opportunities. If it's about particular frameworks they're using or particular methods or tools, they'll train you. I think it is good to, when you're looking at a job, to do your research on any role, right? Look at what kind of work they do. For example, when I moved into the role I'm in now, I was aware of the Research Excellence Framework assessment, but I'd never actually directly worked with it before. It was something I was kind of aware of, but on the side a little bit. So I consciously knew that I had to brush up and learn about that when I moved into this role. But as an entry level, when I started off, I was a project officer or assistant, and I was doing timesheets and very, very small scale projects. I'd say be boundaried, but at the same time, there's lots of opportunities to take on things that can really build your experience. So I said yes to, running a very small, an international delegation who came to learn about the UK charity sector. I said yes because no one else could do it, and that kind of put me in one direction. So be open, don't be afraid to apply as well. I think just go for it. You never know what the pool of candidates are going to be like, and you'll learn something about yourself in the process, if nothing else.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think entry-level roles can be tricky in that, what if I make the wrong move? What if it's not the right role for me, for something that I think I want in the future? And it is good to have the end goal in your head, but at the same time, I think it's also, well, the way that it has worked for me, it is very important to be flexible with that end goal, because you don't want to kind of become a slave to it. Almost, it's quite important to realize that entry-level roles are the time where you are given the opportunity to really explore. It will become less of an opportunity, I think, going forward in your career. You will have less and less likely of these opportunities. So I think this is the best time for that. And if you've secured a role, you will most likely have professional development opportunities, like Verity alluded to, but also even within your role. I was quite lucky because my first roles and my first internship, all of that was pretty broad. It offered me a broad spectrum of things to explore, and that helped me realize which strands did I more gravitate more towards. It was really helpful. But even if it's a bit narrower than that, you can still find opportunities to get more involved in certain things that you find interest you, as long as you're doing your job properly. Those opportunities, they will most likely be given to you, and you will have an opportunity to explore and and shadow and see. Just be proactive in that regard, and don't feel too limited by the specifics of the entry-level role that you're applying to.
Amazing. I'm going to ask one more quick fire question for everyone. So it's a question about kind of championing research. So this question was specifically related to a clinical setting and unfreezing this kind of attitude of research not being perceived as a priority. But I wondered if we could expand that to kind of, with any kind of roles in an academic related industry, how do you champion research and make sure that kind of work is really prioritized by all of the stakeholders you're engaging with, whether they're doing the research themselves or not?
I don't really want to go first all the time. I suppose research plays so many different roles, and it influences all parts of our lives. And when you're in a role, if you're studying at King's and you've come into contact with research and maybe you don't know what direction to take, the conversations I have with academics is always about well, have you thought about this, or have you thought about this application, or this, this application? Universities are part of our immediate communities. Generally speaking, wherever you live, there's going to be a university close by. There's also research that goes on at independent research institutions, as well as organizations, big companies. Lots of large charities also have research roles. So yeah, I think I'm always championing research, and research in all levels and by all different people. Community-led research is also a really important piece that I would champion. So I think whatever it is, like I say, there's a role out there for you. It might not be what you expect it to be, but I think definitely just think a bit more broadly when it comes to research and the applications of it.
Thank you. Corinne and Kat, any final comments at all? No? Fine if not. That is all of the time we have for questions today. Sorry to anyone who asked a question we didn't get a chance to respond to. If you have any particular questions, feel free to drop us an email and we might be able to put you in touch or help you find some helpful resources. On behalf of everyone present who's attended, I'd like to say thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. It's been a really helpful session, and it's been great to hear so many different perspectives. You can see on the slide that's being shared right now that we'd love to hear your feedback on the event so we can continue to improve what we do. And as a reminder, the event is being recorded and will be available to listen back to on our YouTube channel. The Alumni Office hosts a lot of activity throughout the year for our alumni community, including events, networking, mentoring opportunities, if that's something that I know came up in the conversation and you're interested in pursuing, and opportunities to volunteer as well. Just search King's alumni events in your web browser to find out more. Our next How To event will be taking place in February, so keep an eye out on your inboxes for more information. And we'll also be hosting the King's Expert Series session in January 2025, focusing on global leadership in the 21st century. Thank you once more to our panelists and for all of you for coming along. Enjoy the rest of your days.